guys, so I want to come here and do another quick video. I came across this as I was doing research or just kind of looking into the video that I had made about Sarah Bartman, whom I mentioned earlier in my other video about Croatoa. And so I came across him in the process, and I actually learned about him, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, but I learned about him a few years ago, and I was very intrigued by the unfortunate life that he had. This gentleman here name is Ota Benga, or Ota Benga. Some people may have heard of him, some people may not have heard of him, but he actually was victim of actually being on display in a zoo in America in the monkey exhibit. And so I just want to touch bases on him really quickly. I'm not going to go in much detail. Typically what I like to do when I make these videos is just to kind of bring awareness or intrigue one to look further into it. I am not a historian. I am not a researcher in the sense that, to me, doing Google searches are, not enough to call someone a researcher. But you can look into information and find more information in the age that we live in today. But I definitely pay my respect to people like Dr. Runoko Rashidi, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and many others alike who have spent their life and many, many years studying these types of history and things that happen in history. So I kind of just want to bring it out so that if someone may see it and never have heard of it, it might spark their interest to kind of go and do more researching and digging. Again, like I said, I don't feel myself as being a teacher. I just like to inform and educate on a very surface level, I guess, if you can say that. So anyway, get that out of the way. Ota Benga, he was a man from the Congo, Congolese man. He was of the Mbuti Pygmy tribe. And his history is very sad. I'm going to go over it very briefly, just kind of the overview of it. And then, like I said, you guys can feel free to do more digging and researching and reading about him if you desire to. He was living in the Congo. He ended up meeting some white traveling missionary or something like that. It says here he was purchased from African slave traders by the missionary anthropologist Samuel Phillips Werner. And when that transaction happened, he ended up bringing him back to the States in New York, and he actually had him on display in the zoo. Now, during this time, this was back in the maybe I think late 1800s to early 1900s. Here we go, in 1904 to 1906. So a little over 100 years ago. And this was during the time when evolution was very high, and people, particularly of the European lineage, believed that African people derived from monkeys. But anyway, and so it says that he brought them to the zoo and he had them on display. He had full free run. Here it is. At the Bronx Zoo, Benga had free run of the grounds before and after the exhibit. In the zoo's monkey house. And then it says that this is another point here I want to point out. Displays of non-white humans as examples of early stages of human evolution were common in the early 20th century, when racial theories were frequently intertwined with concepts from evolutionary biology. So again, like I was saying, this was the thought process that Black people came from, or that human life pretty much kind of started from came from monkeys, and they use that to prove that Black people, African Americans, so-called, came from a monkey themselves. And so this was very much opposed by the African American community. They had people that were speaking out against it. And so they arranged to be able to have him released from that zoo. And it said he was bought by, let's say here, the mayor released Benga to the custody of Reverend James M. Gordon, who supervised the Howard Colored Orphan Asylum in Brooklyn, and made him a ward. That year, he arranged for Benga to be transferred to Virginia. He gave him money to buy American clothing and had his teeth capped so that he could, kind of be more accepted in the society that they were living in America. And then, long story short, also he began to teach. It says here Benga was tutored in English and began to work, rather not teach. He began to work. He was tutored in English. And then several years later, he had planned to return home to Africa, but during the breakout of World War I, they stopped the passenger travel ships. And so that stopped him from being able to come and go back to Africa. Or go home. And so that caused him to go into a deep depression. So he eventually ended up shooting himself straight through the heart when he was 32 years old in 1916. So it's pretty sad. Anybody that knows any history about the Congolese people, they suffered a great deal of stress at the hands of King Leopold. And I believe this is between the 1800s and the 1900s as well. And King Leopold was ruthless. He was a merciless, person, and he was just horrible. And he worked them half to death, and a lot of times to death. And he would cut off their hands, even of children, if they did not meet the quota or whatever. He would cut their hands off. And so when I look at things like that, on top of the fact that they are in an area that we know was a path for Israelites, it's hard to deny because, the scripture says that these curses would follow us, that the stranger among thee will get up high among you, and, you'll be a servant and, a slave, and you'll be down very, very low, and they'll be up very, very high. And, and so when you look at those things, like I was mentioning in my other video, you look at that with the history of Black Americans, you look at that with the history of Black Caribbeans, you look at that with the history of, Africans in America. In Africa, like people from the Congo, like this brother here. You look at those down in South Africa with the genocide of the Herero and the Nama and the Khoi and the Khoisan. It's a pattern. And a lot of the same things that happen in Black America tend to repeat itself across those different specific tribes. In Africa. So again, like I said, I'm not saying that everyone in Africa or everyone that has melanated skin are of Hebrew Israelite lineage, because we know that's not true. The scripture tells us that Ham had dark skin and that his people inhabited North Africa. And so they definitely were not Hebrew Israelites or from the lineage of Shem, but they also had melanated skin. And also, I'm not saying that every person that's a Bantu or, has Bantu heritage is of Israelite descendancy or lineage as well. Bantu just means people or a people, but a great deal, I truly believe a great deal of the Bantus in sub-Saharan Africa are possibly more than likely of Hebrew lineage after the fact that we left, or our ancestors left out of Israel to flee. And so we went to West Africa, we went to South Africa, and a lot of times people tend to not claim that. I personally believe that there are probably more Hebrews in Africa still to this day than there are scattered around the world. Scriptures talk about how, Judah was scattered around the four corners of the earth. It's possible that some Levi, or it could have been scattered in there, because we all know the scripture tells that Levi didn't have a land. The Levites lived amongst the people. So the rest of the tribes, I'm sure a great deal of them are still within the land. But my time is running out, so I just wanted to show you guys that. And if you feel like you want to research more, do so. Shalom.